Okay, let's unpack this. You've been learning English for a while now, maybe years.
Hmm.
You've tackled the grammar books, maybe you've got a bunch of language apps on your phone. But when you finally try to have a real conversation with someone or, watch a movie without staring at the subtitles, your brain just hits a wall. It
Yeah.
freezes up.
Right.
Or maybe you understand the individual words, but they're talking so fast it all just blends together. It's incredibly frustrating, right?
Absolutely. That feeling of putting in so much time and effort, only to feel that confidence just disappear when it's time to actually use the language.
Hmm.
It's a deeply shared experience for millions of learners. Our source material really highlights this disconnect between studying English and actually, well, living it.
And that disconnect often stems from the methods we've been told work, but maybe aren't aligned with how language actually functions in the real world or how our brains truly learn. So today, we're doing a deep dive into some insights from the sources you shared with us to figure out exactly why this happens, uncovering the common mistakes that can act as these sort of invisible walls, and more importantly, shining a light on more effective strategies to move past them.
Think of this as a kind of shortcut, informed by research and real-world experience, to help you bypass those common frustrations and start building genuine confidence and fluency in English.
Right, so let's jump straight into one of those major pitfalls the sources point out. It's something many of us have done, and it feels productive, but it's often a trap, trying to memorize vocabulary in isolation.
Ah, yes, the classic scene. You've got your list of 50 new words. Maybe you're making flashcards. You feel like you're adding bricks to a wall. You see that number grow. Maybe you track how many words you've learned.
Totally. It feels like progress, doesn't it? I know 1,000 words now,
Hmm.
but then you try to string them together in a sentence, and it comes out sounding, well, unnatural or even nonsensical.
And the sources explain why this happens. Our brains don't store words like individual items in a static list or, a warehouse. We remember words best when they're connected to something else.
Okay.
The other words they commonly appear with, to a situation, an image, an emotion.
So if you just learn the word run, you know the action.
Yeah.
But then someone uses the phrase run into an old friend, and you might picture yourself literally like colliding with them.
Precisely.
Uh,
That's one consequence.
Yeah.
But memorizing isolated words also leads to two main problems according to the material. First, without those connections, words are much harder for your brain to latch onto, so you forget them remarkably quickly.
They just don't stick.
They don't stick. And the second problem, even if you do manage to recall the word, you might not know how to use it correctly in a sentence because you never saw it in action.
Right.
The sources mention examples like someone trying to use new vocabulary and saying something like, I like swimming because muscles water happy. They knew the words muscles, water, happy, but they completely missed how English speakers actually combine those ideas naturally.
That example really hammers it home. You need more than just the definition. You need the context.
Definitely.
If that sounds familiar to you, don't worry. We're going to dive into much more effective ways to build vocabulary that's not only remembered, but is actually usable. But first, let's look at mistake number 2. And this is a big one tied to traditional learning. The obsession with learning grammar rules first.
This approach is deeply ingrained in how many of us were taught. You start with the rules, the exceptions, the verb conjugations, working chapter by chapter through complex grammatical structures.
Like trying to perfectly parse out the nuances of the third conditional from day one,
Exactly.
or needing to know when exactly to use present perfect continuous versus past perfect simple before you can even say hello confidently.
It feels exhaustive, doesn't it? And one of the major issues our sources highlight is that this focus on perfect technical accuracy before you've developed the ability to simply communicate can be incredibly detrimental to your confidence.
Yeah.
You get so caught up assembling the perfect sentence in your head, worrying about every tense and article and preposition, that the conversation has completely moved on by the time you formulated it.
Or worse, it can make English feel so incredibly complex and overwhelming that you start to dread speaking altogether.
Mm-hmm.
You know the rules intellectually, but when the pressure is on, your brain just locks up.
Right. And the material suggests if this happens, you're not alone. It's a common outcome of prioritizing analysis over application from the start.
Okay, moving on, let's look at something that really surprises many learners who've relied heavily on traditional materials. It's a significant gap between what you find in many textbooks and, well, how people actually talk.
This can be quite a jolt. You learn sentences that are technically correct, like, hello, my name is Robert. I'm proceeding to the market to acquire consumable provisions. Grammatically sound, yes, but
But you'll never hear a native speaker say that.
never.
Real conversation is much more fluid, much more casual. It's, hey, I'm heading to the store. Want to grab some food?
Exactly. Real spoken English is full of contractions, slang, idioms, sentence fragments, and conversational shortcuts that are rarely, if ever, found in introductory textbooks.
So if you've only learned textbook English, you might end up sounding overly formal, a bit stiff,
Like you're
or
reading.
like you're reciting lines from a script. Yeah.
And critically, our sources point out you might struggle significantly to understand native speakers in real conversations because they're using all those natural shortcuts and informal structures that you weren't exposed to.
Right.
The speed combined with the unfamiliarity of the structures can make real English sound like a different language entirely.
All right. One more common pitfall before we shift to solutions, and this is particularly relevant in our digital age. Over-reliance, or dare I say, addiction to language apps.
Oh yes, the on-to-present language learning apps. Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel, Quizlet. They are incredibly popular, they're convenient, and they definitely have their place.
Guilty as charged here, too. I've spent hours tapping away, racking up points, getting those virtual high fives. It feels like you're making massive progress.
It does.
But then you step outside the app, try to use that English in a live interaction.
And you realize you can drill vocabulary words perfectly, but you can't hold a spontaneous conversation. This isn't just anecdotal. There's research backing this up. A study mentioned in the material found that while these apps are effective tools for boosting vocabulary and maybe some basic grammar concepts, they often fail to significantly improve real-world speaking skills unless they're used in conjunction with actual human interaction.
So they're great for targeted practice or review, but if they're your only training ground,
You miss the crucial, unpredictable nature of real conversation. You get good at the specific tasks the app gives you, but the ability to react, to adapt, to produce language spontaneously that requires real-world practice.
it's a bit like getting really good at a flight simulator, but never actually stepping into a real cockpit.
That makes sense. Our sources also mentioned a report which highlighted that learners who relied solely on apps scored noticeably lower on real speaking proficiency tests compared to those who actively practice speaking with others.
Wow.
It really underscores the point. Apps can be excellent tools, valuable assistants for reinforcing specific skills, but they cannot replace the dynamic, messy, human element of actually using the language to communicate with others.
Okay, so we've looked at the common traps. Trying to learn isolated words, getting bogged down in grammar rules first, sticking only to textbook English, and relying too heavily on apps. Knowing the pitfalls is crucial. But the real question, the one our listeners are asking, is how do we actually learn English effectively?
Yeah.
How do we build real fluency?
This is where the insights from the sources really pivot towards powerful strategies that align with how our brains are wired to learn language naturally. Let's revisit vocabulary learning first. We talked about how just cramming isolated words is like trying to fill a backpack with water.
Yeah, it just runs out.
Right. So instead of focusing on how many words you're learning in a vacuum, the focus should be on how you're learning them.
Okay.
The material strongly advocates for learning vocabulary through collocations, those common word pairings, and through full contexts like sentences, paragraphs, or even short stories.
So instead of just learning the word make, you make a point of learning make a decision, make a mistake, make friends, make a promise.
Precisely. And there's solid evidence for this. A study referenced in the sources found that students who learned vocabulary embedded in common phrases, in these natural chunks, retained 42% more words after a month compared to those who only studied single words.
Wow.
Living words in their natural habitat makes them much stickier.
42% better retention. That's a huge difference just from changing the method of learning.
It is.
And it helps you sound more natural too, right? You automatically say, make a mistake instead of do a mistake.
Exactly. You start internalizing those natural language patterns. A practical tip from the sources is to make it a rule. For every new word you encounter, find or create at least 2 real sentences using it. See it in action.
I like the idea of making up crazy stories with new words.
Yeah.
Like instead of just learning terrified, you imagine a tiny mouse was absolutely terrified when it saw a giant piece of cheese running away from it.
That kind of active creation, weaving words into stories, connects the language to your imagination and emotions.
Right.
Your brain is far more likely to remember things that are interesting, funny, or a little bit weird. Simple lists are easy to forget. Crazy, memorable stories stick.
The weirder the better for the memory, honestly.
Totally.
Or visualizing abstract words, imagining your living room suddenly turning into a circus with elephants everywhere to remember the word circus or chaotic.
The goal is to make your memory work with you, not against you. And for visual learners, creating those ridiculous images can be incredibly effective for abstract concepts.
Okay, so that's a vocabulary focus on context, collocations, stories, and visualization. What about grammar? How do we break free from that rulebook paralysis?
The key shift here, according to the sources, is moving from trying to memorize grammar as a rigid set of individual rules to learning it through recognizing and using common patterns, the chunks we mentioned earlier.
Right, like take your time, or it's raining cats and dogs, or chunks.
Exactly. Or conversational pieces like, how about we? Or I'm used to, or would you mind it? These are natural word combinations, sequences of words that native speakers often treat as single units. Research highlighted in the material suggests that if you focus on mastering the most common 20% of these sentence patterns or chunks, you can effectively cover about 80% of everyday conversation.
That's fascinating. 80%. It sounds like you're learning the melodies of the language, not just individual notes.
Yeah.
You recognize the pattern, would you mind if, and you just slot in the rest of the idea, rather than trying to build the sentence word by word, rule by rule.
Precisely. Learning in chunks makes your speaking sound much smoother, more natural, and less hesitant.
Okay.
And it reinforces that critical mindset shift. The priority initially is communication, getting your meaning across. You can refine and polish the grammar over time, just like a child learning their first language focuses on expressing needs and wants before worrying about perfect verb tenses.
Communicate first, polish later.
I like that. Okay, strategy number 3, and this one feels intuitive but is often overlooked. Immerse yourself in real English.
Absolutely essential. You need to expose your brain to English as it's actually used by native speakers in authentic situations.
Okay.
This means watching movies or TV shows.
Mhm.
Starting with subtitles is fine.
Mm.
Listening to podcasts, reading social media captions, news articles, books, anything that isn't a simplified textbook dialogue. Because language isn't just words and rules on a page. It has rhythm, intonation, natural speed, cultural references, humor. All the things a textbook struggles to convey.
Exactly. Real content teaches you the nuances, the tone, the slang, the jokes, the sarcasm, the stuff that makes English a living language.
Right.
The sources cite a study where students who actively engaged with real English content for about 5 hours a week saw a significant improvement, 67% in their listening comprehension and speaking confidence within just 6 months.
67% improvement just from engaging with content you enjoy. That's powerful evidence for the value of immersion.
It truly is. Think of grammar books and exercises as crucial training wheels when you're starting out, but real English is where you actually learn to ride the bike freely, experiencing the actual road.
And finally, let's revisit those language apps. If over-reliance is a pitfall, how should we be using them effectively?
The key is treating them as support tools, not your primary learning method. They're assistants, not the main teacher.
So use them for specific tasks where they excel.
Exactly. They can be great for quick review of vocabulary you've already encountered in context, drilling specific grammar points you're trying to solidify, or maybe practicing pronunciation of individual words.
They're like supplements, not the whole meal.
Precisely. They're valuable for targeted practice, but they must always be paired with real-world application. The material emphasizes that the true goal is real communication, speaking, listening, reading, and writing outside the app's environment.
Right. Getting a high score in an app means little if you can't understand or respond to someone in a live conversation.
Nobody gets a job offer because they finished the highest level on a language app. It's the ability to communicate that matters.
Right. So use the apps wisely to strengthen specific areas, but ensure the bulk of your effort is going into actually using English in real dynamic situations.
Now, we've covered the methods, but there's this huge, often invisible obstacle that trips up so many learners. It's the fear of actually speaking.
That fear, that hesitation, it might just be the biggest wall to break through. And based on the insights, a crucial first step is profoundly simple. Lower your expectations.
Yes.
Aim for getting your meaning across, for connection, not for perfect grammar or pronunciation.
Like when you were learning your first language as a kid, you weren't worried about perfect grammar.
Not at all.
You made mistakes constantly saying runned instead of ran or sleeped instead of slept, and that was okay. It was part of the process.
Exactly. Mistakes are not failures. They are absolutely necessary parts of learning. If you're not making mistakes, you're likely not pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
That's so true.
And nobody was born fluent.
Yeah.
Everyone goes through this messy, imperfect stage.
So a really practical tip the sources imply. Start speaking early, even if you feel completely unready. Even if it's just practicing phrases to yourself in your room or trying to narrate your day in English, the fear of speaking only starts to shrink when you actually face it, even in low-stakes situations.
Believing that progress comes through trying, not through being perfect from the start, is fundamental to overcoming that invisible wall.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly revisit and define a few key terms that are really useful to keep in mind as you think about applying these more effective strategies for learning English.
Good idea.
First, we talk about chunk.
Right. This is a group of words that frequently go together and are often treated as a single unit by native speakers, like take your time or I'm looking forward to.
Then there's collocation.
This is a specific type of chunk referring to words that commonly appear together naturally. For example, we usually say, make a mistake, not do a mistake. Make a mistake is a collocation.
Next, context.
This is the situation, sentence, or surrounding information where a word or phrase is used. Learning language in context is crucial because it helps your brain understand and remember how the language is actually used. This describes the ability to speak a language smoothly and easily. It's important to remember that fluency is about confident, clear communication, not about having absolutely perfect grammar or vocabulary.
And finally, real-world English.
Oh, this refers to how English is actually spoken and written in everyday life in authentic situations, as opposed to the often more formal or simplified language found in textbooks. Want to Grab Lunch is a piece of real-world English.
So, there you have it. We've pulled insights from the source material to identify common pitfalls, like trying to learn isolated words, getting fixated on grammar rules too early, getting stuck in textbook English, and over-relying on apps. And we've explored powerful research-backed strategies, learning vocabulary through context and natural chunks, mastering grammar patterns instead of just isolated rules, immersing yourself in real, authentic English content, and using apps strategically as support tools.
The core message from this deep dive is that you absolutely don't have to feel stuck or waste time learning the hard way. You now have insights rooted in how language is truly learned and used effectively, allowing you to approach your learning smarter and faster.
And remember, genuine progress in English isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's fundamentally about connecting the language to your real life, your emotions, and the goal of having authentic conversations.
It's about moving beyond just studying the language and beginning to actually live it.
To leave you with a final thought to ponder as you move forward, how might actively weaving English into the parts of your life that you already care deeply about, your hobbies, your interests, your daily routines, transform your learning experience?
Could shifting your perspective from the task of studying a foreign language to simply using English as a tool to communicate about the things that are important to you fundamentally change your path to fluency? Something to consider as you try out these new strategies.